most important and consequential issue facing the future of Canada? Well, it would not be a stretch at all to point at Canada's collapsing birth rates. However, if you are a keen observer of Canada's parliament, you would notice that solving this issue doesn't seem to be a priority for anyone. When Canada's collapsing birth rates are mentioned, it is usually as a way to justify high levels of mass immigration, something that the Canadian public has not consented to. Or it is mentioned in regards to the collapsing use of the French language in Quebec, something I genuinely sympathize with. But this is a serious crisis in Canada, and the issue still seems to be taboo. The Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, seems to have no concern about it, and the opposition leader seems to be in the exact same position. No mention whatsoever about Canada's falling birth rates. Now, when you break down the details even further, the picture starts to look a lot worse. The young male to young female ratio in Canada has now completely reversed. In Canada, there are now 109 young men aged 20 to 24 for every 100 young females of the same age category. So right around 8% of young men in this country will never find a mate. You don't need to be a genius to understand the consequences of that. Furthermore, the average age of marriage is increasing and the marriage rate in this country is decreasing. Again, a bad indicator. Couple this with a rising unemployment rate, particularly targeting young Canadians, a surge in mass immigration numbers over the past 3 to 4 years, and a housing crisis. Things are not looking very good. So why then is this not a critical issue of debate in Canada? Why aren't solutions being brought forward by our leaders to solve this problem? That is the common question of the video. Why is nobody talking about this? Be sure to drop a like in the video, help us out by subscribing to the True North YouTube channel, and let's get into it. Well, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but let's be honest, you already knew about this. There will be a major incel crisis in this country. This is from open source Stats Canada data compiled by Chris Brunet. Take a look at this. This is the male to female ratio in Canada of 20 to 24-year-olds. In 1970, there were 100 young men for every 100 young women in this country. Today, there are now 109 young men for every 100 young women in this country. Now, I wonder what could have possibly triggered this rather shocking demographic shift. Could it be record levels of mass immigration, millions of people coming into this country, especially young men? No, probably not, right? They just magically appeared in this country. I mean, look at this data here. Since the 1970s, this number has steadily been rising until 2010 or 2011 or so, where it's decided to go straight up, essentially. From Pierre Trudeau all the way through to his son Justin Trudeau, we've been talking about this. This is not just a Liberal government phenomenon. This is a concerted effort in this country since the 1970s to embrace a program of mass immigration. You can see that the rate before Justin Trudeau got into office was rapidly increasing, and that number only continued to rise faster with Justin Trudeau in office. Now, Chris Brunet even went further with this. He broke it down by province, and in Ontario, the problem is the worst. In fact, there are now 112 young men in Ontario for every 100 young women in Ontario. And where did the overwhelming majority of immigrants settle in this country? Wouldn't you just guess it? It's Ontario. Having a large number of young men in this country without a female mate and without any prospects of ever actually having a wife and children is a very dangerous thing for any country to have. Now, like all those financial advisors always say, past performance does not guarantee future results. Perhaps so, but are we really willing to gamble with this? Is this something that we should just say, well, it's not going to happen to us. We're not going to have any major societal problems with a bunch of young men who have no prospects of ever having a mate and a family. It won't happen to us, right? This is Canada. Nothing could go wrong. Now, I don't know about you, but that's not a bet I'm willing to make these days. Now, if we are going to embrace this full-scale mass immigration policy, which I really hope we don't, but I don't know if we're going to have any change anytime soon, maybe we need to go back to the great mind of Ali G, who had a solution to this problem, which was simple. Take a listen.
What is the main thing we ain't got enough of in this country?
Hospitals.
No.
Libraries.
Behave. We ain't got enough fit women. And we've got too many mingers. No offense, Karen. So, why don't we just let in all the fit refugees and turn away all the rank ones? That way we solve both problems.
Now, unlike politicians in this country who refuse to mention Canada's collapsing birth rate altogether, on this show, we have been making a point to address this quite a bit recently. If you are a regular viewer of this program, you will know about Canada's birth rate. It's right around 1.3, 1.4. It has been collapsing. It is well below the replacement rate, and no one is addressing this at all. So we have a collapsing birth rate in our country. But is it because Canadians don't want children, or is it because they feel like they can't afford to have children? Well, a recent survey by Cardis would indicate that actually Canadians want to have more children, but they can't seem to afford it. Here are some of the key findings by Cardis in this recent demographic survey that they conducted. Women in Canada at the end of their reproductive years have about 0.5 fewer children than they desire on average. Missing births vastly outnumber excess births. Nearly half of women at the end of their reproductive years have had fewer children than they wanted. Many factors influence Canadian women in having fewer children than they desire, but the most influential factors relate to the ideas that children are burdensome, that parenting is intensive and time-consuming, and that women want to finish self-development and exploration before having children. The view that parenting is demanding is a bigger factor for low fertility than is housing or childcare costs. More than a third of young Canadians were setting aside plans for a family due purely to financial reasons. Of Canadians in their 20s, Stats Canada found that 38% of them did not believe they could afford to have a child in the next 3 years, with about the same number, 32%, saying they doubted they'd be able to find suitable housing in which to care for a baby. So if a large number of Canadians want to have more kids, but are either finding it too demanding to be a parent or can't afford a house to raise a family in, well, maybe housing seems to be the issue. Now, the next logical question is what has caused this housing shortage? It wouldn't possibly be high levels of mass immigration, would it? Oh yeah, it is. Because that's what Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada warned the federal government before they embarked on this reckless, dangerous path. So the federal government was warned 2 years ago that immigration levels were far exceeding available housing supply. But yet they kept going, didn't they? And we also have the data that shows that despite the increases in immigration, immigrants aren't actually building houses like we were told they were going to. And when you just know it, the line we've been fed by the federal government was that we needed more immigrants to fill Canada's labor shortage. But the latest unemployment rate increased. And according to an RBC economist in the CBC, the reason for that is because there's too much supply for available jobs. The exact opposite of what we have been told.
Younger people are accounting for the bulk of the uptick in job seekers.
Economists point out people aged 15 to 24 haven't seen job gains for more than a year.
The labor market is growing too quickly, and job creation is not keeping up. So it is a bit challenging out there right now for recent graduates.
Higher population without more jobs is part of the issue, but so is an economy that's slowing down.
And who is impacted most by these latest unemployment numbers? Well, according to the CBC and according to the recent data, it's young Canadians, the people who we have to rely on to increase our birth rate. So now you're starting to see how all of this is coming together. How high levels of mass immigration are directly linked to declining birth rates in this country. You have a surge in mass immigration, which creates two new problems, one being a spike in young men outpacing the young female population, and then you also have a housing supply shortage. If you have a housing supply shortage, well then, what happens? Canadians aren't family building because they can't find a house to raise their family in. So the marriage rates are declining, average age of marriage increases, and the fertility rate continues to decrease.